Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Growth Network podcast. Today's information is a great one. Chase, what are we talking about today?
Well, this happens in markets. They shift. And, we noticed that recent study had shown that 62% of buyers are negotiating below asking price, but homes are still increasing in price year over year. So there's this disconnect between what buyers are actually getting and then what sellers are pushing for. And so we kind of dive into how this happens and what are best practices as listing agents and same with buyers agents. So, do you want to mention some of those best practices for listing agents real quick?
Yeah, well, what I'll tell you is if you want to sharpen your skills, you're going to want to tune into this one because as a listing agent, if you don't understand what you should be doing to price homes in a shifting market, that's one of the biggest things we dive into. But then also how to get that information across to the seller to get them on board with pricing it right the first time, and actually protecting them from losing money.
Yeah, and it matters more than people think. I mean, getting a listing can be hard enough, but when you can't help them self-discover where it should be priced in order to be competitive, a lot of times that listing won't sell. And even if it does, it can take a lot of time and energy and effort in managing expectations because we didn't do it right from the beginning. So you're going to learn how to do it right from the beginning. It's a great episode. I really, really hope you guys enjoy it a lot.
Enjoy, guys. And here is a real estate titan that is pushing the limits on the status quo.
And it took years and years of failing to get where I am today.
You're like, whoa, where you actually get the most clarity.
That was kind of one of those pivotal moments when I started building a business.
I spent a lot of time becoming an expert salesperson.
Market stuff to jump into with you guys. And it's some interesting stats. One of our mentors that we follow, it was in his newsletter, but he had brought up an interesting stat in the market right now. And it's that 62% of buyers are paying under asking right now. This is the highest in 6 years. And what's interesting is not only are 62% paying under ask, but list prices are still up 2.5% year over year. So Chase, when you hear that pricing is still going up, but buyers are paying below asking, what does that tell you about the market and about either seller expectations or how agents are operating today?
Well, so we are talking national numbers here. So your market
Good
could
point.
be different. So if you're like, that's not true, it might not be true for you. So that's fair. But if I think nationally, 6 years, I'm assuming this is 2025, going back to like 2019, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
So if that's true, like 2019 was a pretty hot market. So while the headline might be like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen this in 6 years, it was still a very strong market back then. But with list prices going up and buyers are paying under, it kind of shows me a couple things, like the average agent doesn't price homes correctly. That would be the first thing that goes through my head. And the strong buyers agents are reading the data and they're saying like, hey, it's normal to offer less. I mean, so now we're kind of like getting into this habit of, we're going to price them high and then we're going to get them to reality. Where does your mind go when you read that?
Well, you first of all, you said something that's interesting, which, hey, this might not be your market, right? And this is a national average thing. Here's what comes to mind when I think about any of this stuff is that regardless of the market, pricing strategy is always one of the most important skill sets for a real estate agent. Pricing strategy was important when it was a hot market. And what I can tell you about, generally across the nation, when it was a really hot market, agents that didn't have good pricing strategy and that skill set really built in, they actually probably lost their clients upside, right? And now if they don't have it, if their market is aligned with what the national average is saying, then they're probably creating more downside for their sellers. So meaning the seller ends up chasing the market, they end up selling for less than what they could have. So in both instances, the seller leaves money on the table. And so I think that's the moral of the story is pricing strategy matters no matter what the market.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about pricing strategy, someone's mindset might be like the way you framed it. Maybe it wasn't pricing strategy, but I think it essentially was. But let me just talk about my point. I think anyone could hear that and be like, huh, um, that's all about understanding what homes are worth. So you got to be good at reading data and you got to be good at, interpreting it and all that. But that is not the only part of the equation as a listing agent, right? It doesn't matter. You could be the foremost expert, on Pawn Stars when they're like, oh, I got to get an expert in and see what this is worth. And then they bring the expert in and he's like, oh, boom, 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 boom. And they're like, it's worth X. Cool. It doesn't matter if you're even that expert. You have to get the seller on board. So one of the largest pieces of the puzzle is, not knowing what the home's worth. It's getting your seller to know what the home's worth and then getting them on board and pricing it correctly, right?
So what I hear you saying is understanding what and how to say the right things in a way that get them to self-discover what they should be doing to price their home.
The term self-discovery, that's the real key. That's the mastery of that skill for sure. How can I get them to know what I know?
Yeah. David, were you going to say something, bud?
Yeah. So, Chase said the average agent doesn't know how to price homes or is pricing them incorrectly. When I hear that number, that 63% of homes are selling under the asking price, based on the 80/20 principle, it seems like there's even the best agents, if they're doing the lion's, share of the listings, are not pricing the homes correctly.
Yeah.
If 63% of them.
Yeah, I would say that they're probably just adjusting slower. They're not reading the market. And then number two, they haven't taken the time to figure out what and how to say the right thing to get sellers on board with what's really going on in the market. Chase, what do you think? Do you think if 62% sold for less than the sold price, do you think a large percentage of those sold for less than they would have had they been priced properly to begin with?
Well, and that's okay, so I have no data, right? But I've just been doing this forever, and so have you. But yeah, they probably would have sold for more money if they would have sold faster, So you're presuming that these didn't sell quickly, right? Because if something sells fast, it rarely goes for under the asking price. That's pretty rare. So they were probably on the market for a while, and these are just the ones that sold, Brent. So how many haven't sold? That's the data I'd want to pair with this, which we don't have, unfortunately. But how many homes are not selling today versus? I bet that's at a 6 or 7 year high as well. So we're focusing on the ones that are selling, and I think there is a slow shift too. Let's take top agents for example. They do what works, and as the market shifts, it takes time to adjust your business to what works. You're like, oh crap, I can't do this anymore. And
Sure.
I coach top agents. I know you do too, Brent, and they have a lot of overpriced listings.
Yeah.
And some of that's just like, well, they start to buy the excuses that sellers have. Like, well, I really need this. Otherwise we can't sell, and that's what they hear. But the reality is like, I want this if I'm going to sell. Usually.
Yeah. And I think there's like a list of things like that don't impact the value of the home. And one of them is what you paid for it. One of them is what you owe or what you need to get out of it. Like the market is the market, and it's our job to figure that out. One of the things you said, Chase, that I actually want you to kind of like unpack a little bit, because I think this is really good and it will guide these guys on maybe some talk tracks that they could lean into, which is how fast a home sells. I think as agents, we get conditioned like, oh, days on market is up. Days on market is 40. Days on market is 50. Days, whatever. But you said something that's really interesting. The faster a home sells, the more likely it is that that home sold for the most amount of money possible. Meaning days on market doesn't grow the value of the home. It shrinks it.
Yeah. Well, it certainly erodes negotiation power from a seller's perspective. Like, I don't think anyone in the history of real estate would debate with that. Like, the more time it's on the market, you're eroding your negotiation power.
So how do you walk a seller through that conversation? Like, how do you get them to kind of self-discover that days on market actually hurts their position?
So probably the best way is to put them in the buyer's shoes. And you can usually do that pretty easily, because I think over 70% of people that are selling are buying as well. So they are going to be a buyer. And so I like to paint the picture. I'm like, Brent, you're going to buy a home. I can't wait to help you. Let me ask you this. If we found the perfect home today, like right now, everything about it is exactly what you want, and you even think it's priced fairly, and it just came on the market today, what would you offer? Would you want to lowball? Would you want to give them their price? What would you want to do?
I mean, given that it's just on the market, I probably would. Well, and I don't know. I'd have to go to the open house. I'd have to.
Yeah, but you already did that. You looked at it.
Okay.
Everything was great. And it just hit the market today
I'm
and it's
gonna, I'm
perfect.
gonna, I'm gonna probably give them what they want,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess.
Okay. Let's say everything is exactly the same. Nothing's changed. It's the perfect home. It's priced fairly. You love it, but you check and it's been on the market for 60 days. Now,
Mm.
what are you going to offer?
Well, my assumption is if it's been there for 60 days, there's not anybody else I'm competing with. So I'm gonna go in with a lower offer.
Yeah, and there's some other things that aren't being said here is like, what's wrong with it? Like, why hasn't someone else bought this? If this was such a good deal, it would have already been bought. Maybe it's not priced fairly. So you start to second guess and question everything.
Yep.
So I guess from a buyer's perspective, now they're in the buyer's shoes. So why would we bring that up, or when would we bring that up? Is probably a better question because usually, I mean, these top agents we're coaching, they're not idiots. They know what they're doing. They know what it should be priced at. They told the seller what to price at, but the seller's like, well, hey, how about this? Why don't we just try it? And that's the perfect time to bring it up. So what ends up happening is they're like, let's just use 500,000. You know, I think it's worth 500,000. Why don't we just try 550? And the agent reluctantly, they're like, just sign the paperwork and get me out of here. Yes, 550, whatever. Right. So they get the 550, even though you told them like, hey, let's get it down to 500 within 2 weeks. They didn't listen to you. They're like, you know what? We had that one showing. I think there's more. There's good weather this weekend, whatever, all the BS to get you to stay and not do the reduction. So 30 days go by, they go to 525. 30 more days go by, they go to 500. Now, the scenario, you put them back in the buyer's shoes. And just remember, if it was 0 days on market, they would have gave the asking price. If it's 60 days on market, something's wrong with it. We're not going to give them the asking price. We're going to lowball. Even though both scenarios, they felt like it was priced right. So
Yeah.
now when you get to 500, they're not giving you 500 because you've been on the market 60 days. They're giving you 475, right? Or like they're negotiating.
Yep.
So every agent on the planet knows that like the longer it's on the market, the less negotiation power you have.
I think if you put them in the buyer's shoes, they also know that because they're saying the story out loud. They're saying, well, this is what I would do. And it's just so happens that's what every other buyer would do as well.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows like when something goes on sale, like you got to get there early, otherwise all of it's going to be gone. And then when you get there and it's like 3 days later, but it went on sale 3 days ago, you're like, oh, maybe this isn't a good deal. We just know that with everything. Like you don't go to school for this. You just know it. You've already gone through it. So,
Well, and this is called, I mean, essentially this is walking them through how to properly position a home. That's what you're doing. So what is if you're an agent and your market matches what this story is telling, so basically homes are being listed at overpriced numbers, and then buyers are offering less, and the sellers are accepting it. I don't even know what the days on market is in this equation, but I'm assuming days on market is pretty high. Would be my guess.
For sure. Yeah.
I don't see this as people listing it and them accepting buyers' offers under asking within the first couple of weeks. So let's assume days on market is 30, 40 days, maybe higher. So if that's the case, Chase, what's a strategy that an agent could use to price a home today that's different than how they would price a home when the market was moving quite a bit faster?
So I have an answer to that. And I want to give a couple more caveats real quick, like 30 seconds or less. So
Okay.
caveats are like if you're pioneering a market, like there's no comps, there's no active listings, there's nothing like this. Like don't expect to sell it in a day, right? You know, you might need more time. Or, you know, certain luxury markets, let's say your market, there's not a lot of luxury sales. It might just take more time for that buyer to show up, right? If there's, you know, only been one sale in the last 24 months over a certain price point, or you're getting into like land sales, you know, so rule all those, you know, weird scenarios that you have in your head that you're like, well, that wouldn't work for, okay, cool. It wouldn't. Like that's where you need a coach or someone that really knows what they're doing. Talk to them. Now, to answer your question, for the 95% of listings it will work for, because it is the overwhelming majority of listings, it will work. Now, what's the strategy? Like, what are some things we can do? What I would do is I would look at active listings. That's what I would do.
The pendings and solds a little more out of the picture.
Yeah, I mean, they're nice and they're helpful to get an idea of where the value is, but then what are we competing against? Because if days on market are going up, the buyers only have a certain pool to buy from. So I need to win. Like, one of my mentors said, you're in a competition.
Mm.
So if I'm listing my home, what's my competition? And, you can use math to help them figure that out. Like, so for example, there's 100 homes like mine on the market, and every week, 5 of them sell.
Okay.
So that means 5% of them sell every week. So if you want to sell in week 1, you should be in the top 5%, right?
Correct. That makes sense.
So
If you want to
price
sell,
value.
if that's your math is
Yeah,
this many sell within a week, then if you want to sell in a week, you need to use that as your target.
correct. As a guideline. And by the way, you talk about self-discovery. You just show them like, hey, there's 100 homes on the market just like yours or similar to yours. We're going to position yours to show why yours is so much better. And buyers are looking at this list. So it looks like about 5 sell per week or about 20 sell per month, which means, if you want to sell in the next 30 days, you need to be in the top 20%. If you want to sell in the next week, we probably need to be in the top 5.
Okay. So what you're saying, this is interesting, just to unpack it for everybody listening. What you're saying is you could look at pending and sold to give you a little context on how the market's behaving. You could probably even look at pending and sold to see that homes are selling below list price. Like you could probably do that. But depending on your client's goals and the number they want to hit, you're going to have a much more predictable sales process if you use active listings and absorption rate. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, correct.
Because the math is the math. If the market is saying that 5% of the like properties are selling per week, then the only way you're going to be one of those 5 is to be priced in that range.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to have your value is going to have to get you in that top, whatever, that top percentage.
Because ultimately that's what the buyers are saying the value is. So what do you think is, go ahead, David.
I was gonna say, is there because when you're using actives, right? It's like, and the consumer does too, comparing them to other overpriced listings, right? Like if they've been on the market for a while, or even if they haven't been on the market and they're brand new and they're still overpriced. Like if they, how do you approach that with a buyer? They see, oh, this home just hit the market. And
Two things you got to look at, David. One is, what kind of market are you in? Because in this market where presumably listing inventory is going up, buyers are having more negotiation power, right? So that's the market we're in, which means you're going to have more active listings than you normally do, right? Go the other way. Inventory is going down, right? Buyers are paying at or above asking price. You don't even look at the active inventory because there's not going to be very much, right? You look at the solds and pendings and you usually buffer above that. But you can't look at the solds and pendings and think that's the way the market's going because inventory is climbing, which could lead to prices, softening or even coming down. So now, like, to the point, if we have 100 active listings, yeah, the 50 worst ones are probably going to be overpriced. But we're not like, hey, go look at those 50 worst ones. Like, you're wanting to win. Does that make sense? So it does it in itself, right?
So just to recap what you're saying to make sure that I'm understanding David's question of what you're saying. David was asking how do you handle it with the seller when they see a home that's being listed and it's overpriced and they're like, oh, that's priced at that, so mine should be priced at that. And what you're saying is really it's in the positioning of your conversation with them of, well, you said you wanted to sell in X amount of time. And the math is showing us that this many homes out of this many homes is selling in that amount of days.
Correct.
So the math tells us that we just need to be priced in this range right here in order to sell within the next X amount of days.
Yeah. And you can say, hey, they listed at X price. That's cool. But, ideally, it has tons of days on market and you show them, well, that one's been on the market 80 days. Is that what you want? Or 300 days. Is that what you want? But if it's a brand new listing, you can be like, well, that's cool. They're like, we already looked at the sold and pending data. You can see the other active listings. Why would someone buy this one over these 50, right?
Yeah. And this brings me back to, for everybody on this call, if you don't know what the definition of marketing actually is, or what 3 points marketing actually is. This is really important. I think it actually helps with the seller conversation. Is marketing is actually data, price, and exposure combined. And so what that does a couple of things, and positioning. Like you can put positioning in there as well. Positioning is like the story you tell, the price, where you're at, price range in comparison to your competition. Like that's positioning as well. But when you take those things into account, then the nice thing is a couple things happen. In the initial conversation, you get to say, hey, if we're going to market your home properly, then we need to look at the data, we need to look at the price, and then you guys need to understand the exposure that we're going to give it. So the data is what Chase is talking about. It's based on the current market that we're in. The data suggests that if you want to sell in this amount of days, we need to be positioned here in the price. So that then determines your price. Then you have the exposure. The cool thing is, though, is if it didn't work, it doesn't come back on you and they don't say, hey, you're not showing my home to enough people. It comes back on the marketing conversation and say, well, let's look at the data and then see if the price is currently in the correct position. And then the data will typically tell us, a different story. So data is amount of eyeballs on it, showings, drive-bys, calls, and then also what's happened in the market since you've listed. There could have been other homes that went on the market that took a more aggressive approach. So all of that repositions you to bring them back into the conversation. When agents go in and they have a pricing strategy conversation and then a separate marketing conversation, then what's the consumer going to beat up when the time comes? Are they going to beat up the pricing strategy or are they going to beat up the marketing strategy? Anybody ever been a part of that conversation? They beat up the marketing strategy, just so you know. When you wrap them into the same thing, marketing is data, pricing, and exposure, then when they come to beat up the marketing, you're now addressing data and pricing inside of that, which is, by the way, read any marketing book in the world, and that's what they're going to tell you. That's what true marketers do. They look at those things. Go ahead, David.
Having a proactive, continuous conversation about these things is critical. I think making sure that they know the evolving data is critical to where they are in the market.
Yeah, Chase, you talk about that. You talk about the either proactive or reactive conversation.
Yeah. Well, I want to go into something what you're saying, but super quick on the proactive reactive. If you call them, it's a 5-minute update, right, with the seller. But if they call you, it's a 20-minute defense on everything that you've ever thought about doing for their property and why you think it's working and what you're going to do next. So you definitely want to be proactive. One thing I want to give you guys, which I think it goes hand in hand with this conversation right here. It's a tool to help the seller understand that pricing is a part of marketing. And the easiest way you can do that, I think, use any sort of commodity or, like a gallon of milk or a gallon of gas. That's a hot topic right now, right? So, Brent, what would you pay for a gallon of gas?
Honestly, whatever the thing says,
whatever the price is.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's the going rate right now is like $3.70.
Yeah, let's call it $4. Okay. So California, you're paying more than that. Sorry. Let's just say there's 2 gas stations, and one of them is really, really, really strong at marketing. The other one has nothing but a sign. They just have a sign with the price. So they have $4 a gallon, the one with sign and price. But the other one, it's $10 a gallon for gas. Okay. What if they put one of those things out in front? First of all, which one are you going to go get gas from?
$4.
Yeah,
there's probably going to be a line at that one if there were the only 2 gas stations in town.
Yeah. But what if they put one of those things out front, like the wavy flaggy arm thing that dances out front in front of the $10 gallon gas?
What if they offer free hot dogs and slushies?
Yeah. There you go. Free hot dogs and slushies, right? Are you going to buy gas? No, you're going to go eat a hot dog and slushie while you're filling your tank up with the other. What they do, right? They could take an ad out in the newspaper. They could fly a plane around with a thing behind saying, buy gas here. All you're doing is telling more and more people about your overpriced gas. That's it. And you might actually be selling gas, just not yours. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because people are going to be like, oh my gosh, we got to go to that wavy armed flag thing to buy our gas. That place is amazing. And then they're like, oh, it's only $4 right next door.
That's exactly right. And just real life scenario is someone sees your home. I share it. We're in Idaho. I share it with someone in California. Californians want to move to Idaho. They even think your home's great and they would buy it for the price. But do you think they look at other homes? Or do you think they just buy yours? Of course, they pull up Zillow and they're like, let's see a couple other homes near, and they're like, oh my God, this one's 50,000 overpriced, 100,000 overpriced. Like you just sold someone else's house. Great job.
Well, so back to your metaphor. Now let's say that the gas stations were a mile apart, but you had a gas price strategist at your side that told you the best place to go get gas based on price. Like now you're not going to fail no matter what. You're going to go get the best price no matter what. And so even if the Californian sees your house and says, that's the one I want, they're going to link up with a real estate agent. And the real estate agent's going to be like, yeah, okay, so based on this, this, and this, I think your offer should come in down here because, it's currently overpriced by X.
Yeah. So even if you talk them into buying your home and they want to buy it, I mean, and even if the realtor is bad, now you got an appraiser. And the appraiser is going to say, hey, can't freaking sell it for this, right? So, do you want them to be realistic at your appointment when you take the listing, or do you want them to beat you up for 6 months only to find out it's going to come in low at the appraisal?
Yeah. Well, and so go ahead, David.
I was going to say, what you just said, overpricing your home helps someone else sell their house. You say that to a seller and it's like, dude, that's going to cut.
Well, that's the same thing you can say when you're showing the absorption rate. 10 homes, 3 are selling every month or whatever. Say these bottom 7 homes helped those 3 sell, right? They made them look more valuable, which is true. So, all the time and effort that those 7 put into the marketing and all of the stuff that they did really just drove people to the other 3. And eventually the other 7 are going to get in line.
And by the way, like last thing, if you have a deal, and the buyers looked at everything and they're like, holy crap, this is a deal. They're probably not the only buyer that did that. There's probably multiple buyers that did that. And then you could get into a scenario where now you have a very fast sale or even possibly some sort of bidding war where you're going to get at or above asking price.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Real Estate Growth Network podcast, where we dig into real estate topics.
And we put these out every single week, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
See you later.